Someone once said, dream as if you'll live forever, and live as if you'll die today. I'm trying to move on, trying to live. I'm helping others like me, people with gifts. I can teach them how to use it, and protect themselves. But somewhere in the darkness, I can't help but feel them watching and waiting for me. I don't think I'll ever feel safe. This evil we live with, this darkness inside us, and the ones that want to bring it all to an end. This is who we are.
You've been listening to music from the web series Millennium Apocalypse, written, recorded, and arranged by Matthew Gatsos. You can find this soundtrack and others by Matthew Gatsos at the resurrectionfilms.net website. You too?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I hit it.
Yay!
That's the first hurdle done. Yay!
It's the first time I've done it on the laptop and everything's running pretty smoothly.
Well, you've just jinxed yourself there, haven't you? Well done.
This might just be the way that I do it from now on, considering it's working just fine.
Double jinx.
Yeah, well, hopefully.
But you've got all my traffic background noise to contend with. Apologies.
Yes. Well, that's your fault. No.
I know, and I'm not even sorry.
It's all right. All right. Well, we're back from our short little break, and we're going to continue this double episode and discuss the sequel to Chinatown, which is The Two Jakes. The Two Jakes is a 1990 American neo-noir mystery film. And like I said, it's a sequel to the 1974 film Chinatown. There's a bunch of changes with this film, and we'll discuss that in a few minutes. But first, let's talk about our second drink of tonight. This one is named after the great American actor, and as far as The Two Jakes goes, also director, Jack Nicholson. And that is the name of this drink, the Jack Nicholson.
Oh.
This is a shooter. So unlike most of our other drinks, which are primarily mixed drinks, this is like a mixed drink shooter. All right. But it's a double shot.
Nice.
All right. And it consists of a 1/4 ounce of wild turkey. Blah. Not my favorite.
What is wild turkey?
It's like a whiskey. This is a wild turkey 80 proof bourbon though, so it's probably okay. I've never had it, but I've had a wild turkey, just whiskey. Blah. I don't really care for it. A 1/4 ounce of Stoli vanilla vodka.
What?
It's shortened to Stoli. That's what I know it by. But the full name I can't pronounce, which is Stolichnaya, something like that.
You can't pronounce something. What? That does surprise me.
Yeah. So Stoli's vanilla vodka. I believe you can also get other brands in vanilla as well. Also a 1/4 ounce of Kahlua and a 1/4 ounce of caramel liquor. I don't know what that is. I have to.
I don't know what Kahlua is.
Kahlua, really?
No.
Oh, you can have to look that up. It's found in like tropical drinks, or I guess like coffee drinks as well. It's similar to like the Irish whiskey, I guess.
Okay.
In a way. I mean, yeah. Check it out. Okay, so 1/4 ounce wild turkey, 1/4 ounce of Stoli vanilla vodka, 1/4 ounce of Kahlua, 1/4 ounce of caramel liquor. Now the instructions, which is very simple. You mix it over ice and strain into a shot glass. right? So it's basically the consistency of a double shot.
Wow.
And that sounds like it's, it's a pretty strong drink.
Pretty hardcore.
Yeah, but the clue is pretty easygoing, the caramel liquor and the vanilla, so it's probably tastes pretty decent. I'm going to give that one a shot.
Oh, God. Your coffee kicked in.
All right. Now that madness is over, let's take a listen to the trailer for The Two Jakes.
The war was good for LA. Brought in money, opportunity, and more than a little greed.
Put the weasel in jail. Nothing else matters. Nothing else in the world.
How about $5 or $6 million?
Could I make a phone call?
Please.
Now the war's over, and people come here because they think the money's easy and the women are easier. That's a combination that's good for business. The divorce business.
I was honestly unfaithful.
Which, by the way, pays for my convertible, my country club dues,
Hell of a shot.
and my office building where I can shut the doors and not even hear the oil well pumping across the street. The war was good for women, too. Gave them jobs.
Oh, you're gonna make me do it, aren't you?
Money, and enough independence to double the divorce rate, which didn't hurt my business any either. After all these years, I've learned a couple of things.
Trick or treat.
The clients lie.
Say hello to Jay Gittes. What's this?
It's a hand grenade. You ought to know that. You're a war hero.
The cops always think I'm lying.
How do you know he didn't have the gun with him?
Oh, I'd never frisk him before I let him walk in on his wife hanging on the headboard while some guy was slamming her into the wall, Lou.
The lady in question reminds you of someone else. And marriage has made more liars out of men than golf. Of course, a guy can't live without golf.
The deal is you'll turn the wire over to me at the end of this round, or I'll have you killed.
Sure, the society crowd turns up its nose at mousing around and peeking through keyholes, but they're the ones who pay the most to see what's on the other side.
Come on. You can tell me. Blackmail. What are you talking about?
You tell me what the hell you think's going on here, and I'll tell you if I think you're right.
These days, people want to have it all. New cars, power steering, houses in the suburbs, speedboats, and instant cameras.
Oh, no, Kitty, how could you?
What's going on here?
How could you, Kitty? How could you with him? Not with him!
So now, it only takes a minute to see what a murder looks like.
Then what happened?
Usually happens when somebody pulls a gun. Everybody ducks. What I do for a living may not be very reputable, but I am. In this town, I'm the leper with the most fingers.
That was a trailer for The Two Jakes, a 1990 American neo-noir film, and the sequel to the 1974 film Chinatown. It is directed by and starring Jack Nicholson. It also stars Harvey Keitel, Meg Tilly, and a whole bunch of other people. It's a fun little movie. I enjoy it quite a bit. It's not as great as Chinatown. Some people just downright don't like it, and that's totally fine as well. I'm sure, again, Carly's gonna despise it, which is totally fine, understandable. Even though there's no incest going on in this film, she's gonna have to find a new arch enemy.
Well, it might be time for confession time.
Oh no. Oh, wait a second.
Oh no.
Wait a second.
Oh no.
If you say you like this better than the first one, oh my God. Oh my God. Okay, let's hear your confession.
I liked it better. I liked it better. But that is because I'm watching it on its own merit and not comparing it to Chinatown, which a lot of people would have done. I'm just watching it as like just a film that I happened to put on that I enjoyed. And there's a lot of linking in to Chinatown, but it survives quite well on its own as a separate entity. If you hadn't seen Chinatown, I think you could still get it and sit and enjoy it.
Yeah, I would.
I mean, it's
totally
not
agree with that.
flawless. It is not perfect at all. When I say I liked it better, I only marginally liked it better because I watched them one after the other. I'm not saying it's fantastic, but I did. I did. It was a bit more kind of throwaway and a bit more fun.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't know if I would call it more fun, but it's
compared to the ending of Chinatown, which people don't like, it was a bit more fun.
Well, I think it's just equally as dark, but I guess the reasoning behind some of the stuff is more in a positive. I think it's presented a bit more. I wouldn't say lighthearted is the right word, but it is kind of presented very differently. Yeah, from the beginning. It doesn't have the bleak overtones that Chinatown had. Chinatown was a very bleak film, which was more in line with the film noir. This one definitely feels neo-noir. Mm-hmm. It does have a different tonality to it. Yeah. Than
like
its predecessor.
Even just the opening of him, because they almost replicate the beginning where he goes through his office and kind of everything that's going on and the jobs that people have. And it just seems a little bit more comical. In this film.
And it is. It definitely is. They definitely upped that sort of, and it's weird because it's not like it's straight out comedy.
No,
it's just the sort of, it's just the tone, the feel of it.
Yeah.
They're just, it's different.
Yeah. Instead of it being more slightly depressing, like, oh, this has happened. It's darker. It's upsetting. In this one, it's kind of like, oh, for God's sake, it's almost like a bit of a comedy routine at one point, like when he's, fixing, when she's trashing the office and he's just fixing things. It is a little bit kind of more laugh or you'd cry.
Right.
The sort of setup.
And I would agree with that. I think that's pretty good assessment there. And it continues throughout the movie as well. I mean, you can tell it's written by the same person, or at least mainly, because it still has the same, in my opinion, the same sort of structure as the first film. I still feel like we're following along this detective who discovers clues and doesn't have the full story, and just things are getting kind of pieced together. Although in this film, I feel like there are other times that we do see the other character's perspective, which is a little different. But overall, I feel like it's still kind of that same, that same kind of discover as you go kind of film, and it's not spoon fed to you, and you have to kind of pay attention to really get it. And I feel like this movie ends up being just as convoluted as Chinatown.
Oh, definitely.
In the exact same ways. It was interesting though that the direction that they took it with the housing market, opposed to like the water in the first film. And I thought that was pretty interesting to, way to approach it and bring in old characters, or at least by name, through that storyline with the mineral rights and the oil and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it was a good direction to go. I do think that the inherent flaws with this film aren't necessarily because it's a sequel, but I think it's because Jack Nicholson's direction. Not that he's bad, not that his direction is bad or anything. It's just not the same level as Polanski, by far. You can see that he's probably learned a lot, and because he started directing a long time ago, back in his days with Roger Corman. So he's been around for a long time, and he's gone back. I mean, obviously he's primarily an actor, but he's done some directing as well. And this is probably, I don't know if this is the first full feature that he's directed, but it's probably the most prominent one. And I still think that he didn't quite, it's not quite at that level. I mean, well, it's nowhere near the level of Polanski. But it does have its own sort of Jack Nicholson feel to it. It's a little more flashier in strange ways than the subtlety that Polanski brought to Chinatown, which I think made it feel more natural as a noir film. And Jack Nicholson's direction made this feel overtly neo-noir. I mean, this feels more along the lines of like the DOA remake with, I can't think of his name right now, but those 80s kind of neo-noir kind of films where they kind of, they're already sort of dated in a way because they're neo-noirs, but then they have that 80s kind of sensibility to them as well. And that's to me where the Two Jakes kind of stumbles, but I still enjoy it quite a bit because Jack Nicholson is just fun to watch in these movies. He feels completely 100% in his element, like he was born to play these characters. And I wish he had been around in the time of like the 40s to play more of these noir kind of characters. I think that would have been amazing. But it's not on the same level as Chinatown in terms of the directorial quality to it. Having said that, as you brought up the comedy aspect, it's a really fun movie. Just the strange banter between Jack and Harvey Keitel's character is just kind of fun, and they're like having this sort of conflicting kind of battle, like butting heads, but in a comical kind of one-upmanship sort of way, in a weird way. And it just brings a lot of fun to the movie that the first movie didn't have. The first movie was just extremely bleak and dark, and this one is dark in its own way, but tonally they keep it fun. It has more of a, I would say, like end of the 50s, early 60s kind of feel to it, mixed with 80s, which is just strange to say, but that's just kind of what it feels like to me.
Yeah, because it has a lot of dark aspects, like the flashbacks and him kind of is set after the war and him being a prisoner of the past, and it is quite dark, but it's just not presented as being dark and bleak. And
yeah, I almost feel like the flashbacks help in a way in terms of fleshing out his character, Giddy's character, and sort of seeing his character's arc across the films. Like he's different. He's a different person. He's more experienced, but those sort of, and it's a theme to the movie, the sort of ghosts that are still haunting him sort of thing.
I mean, I'm a sucker for flashbacks. So as soon as there was a flashback, I thought, I like this.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I think those were used pretty well in this film. I think all of the elements from the first Chinatown were used well in the sequel.
Yeah.
And you're right, though. You didn't necessarily have to see the first film to really like this movie if you were going to like it. Although I personally would recommend watching it just because it's a far superior film, and, it'll help you understand his character and the connection to Mulray and all that stuff. Much, much more.
Definitely. And you can see why sort of fans of Chinatown might not gravitate to this as well. I can see why they wouldn't necessarily rate it.
Yeah, I think a lot of them were kind of off-put by it because, I think mostly because Polanski wasn't attached to it, right?
And also, it's a long passage of time. If you're a Chinatown fan and you've watched the first one, this is a big chunk of time that's passed for you to then sort of be looking at this character. So I can see why people don't don't see the merit in it. I can understand why people think, oh no, this is not a sequel. This is not something that's worth anything in compared to Chinatown, because it was a bit of a shock for me. And bearing in mind that I wasn't overly keen on Chinatown, I was like, bloody hell, he's aged quite a bit.
Yeah,
it is a jarring period of time that's gone.
Right. Yeah. It definitely, and it was one of like the I guess it's 11 years story wise, but it was more like 16 years in reality between films. If I'm correct, it was 74 and then 1990. The previous 16 years weren't necessarily great to Jack Nicholson in terms of, he's quite a bit older in this film, but that's, in my mind, that's okay, because I think that they dealt with that story-wise in terms of showing his character has grown. He's become smarter, more intelligent, more cautious than he was in Chinatown. And I appreciated all of those little elements that they put in there. And that had a lot to do with the flashbacks and just the way that he spoke and how he did things was slightly different. He felt more comfortable in his role as a detective than it felt like he did before.
Yeah.
And I appreciated all that kind of stuff. I thought that was...
he seemed a lot more flashy. Not flashy, but he kind of more cavalier, maybe is the word.
Yeah, no.
In Chinatown. And then obviously his actions had that consequence, and now you can see that he's carried that with him. And I thought that was a really good part of the story.
Yeah, you definitely could see like he made mistakes in China that cost him, like, the Roman Polanski who played the thug that cuts his nose.
He was a nose slicer, wasn't he?
Yeah. Which he did a great job with that, by the way. We didn't even bring that up in the last portion of this, but
we didn't. I meant to say what a good nose slicer he was. In this one, you could tell he's still that sort of cocky kind of guy, but he's more reserved. He's more smart about how he comes across with that sort of stuff. And that's kind of interesting because he's still flashy. I mean, but they sort of adjust it to less of his verbalness and more to like his presentation, like his shoes, which are a big part of the opener of the film. And that made sense because he's older. He's probably got a little more money. He's got a nicer office, more staff. I wouldn't necessarily say dresses better, but I'm sure the idea was that he dresses better or flashier. So all that, they did a great job playing all that stuff into the story. And I think that's sort of the same deal throughout the film. I think everybody in this film is sort of has similarities to the original film, and it's just upped the sort of character development of them. For instance, if we just sort of replace, maybe Cross with Harvey Keitel's character, for instance. They sort of play that sort of red herring with Harvey Keitel's character, though, as where you think he's a super horrible person, but when you get to the end of the movie, you're really realizing all he was really trying to do was protect her. And that was one of the things I remember. I saw this in the theater when it first came out, and I was, gosh, what was I, 12? No, 11, something like that. Is this a 15 rating? What's the rating on the film?
We don't have those numbers.
Oh, so you were sneaked into the cinema to watch it. Oh, I see.
Well, even like in the early 90s and stuff like that, there wasn't, they weren't really hard on that kind of stuff. That didn't really happen till the late 90s, early 2000s, where they really started bearing down on kids in the theater. Like when I was young, my dad would just drop us off at the theater and say, "I'll pick you up in 2 hours."
Don't spend much on popcorn.
No, I mean, I saw movies that I never should have seen. Let's just put it that way. Way too young. Like, for instance, do you remember that movie Cool World with Brad Pitt?
No.
Where it's like it's live action and also mixed with animation, kind of like Roger Rabbit. But this was much more adult.
Oh,
It's like,
okay.
there's things like that, and just all kinds of movies that I shouldn't have seen at the age of 10.
You walked in and thought, I'll have a ticket for that.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. No, I walked into the Two Jakes, and I was a little late getting there. I remember it very distinctly because I just thought it was amazing. I'd never seen Chinatown, never heard of it. I didn't see it for like another 10 years till I got older. But I walked in on that moment where he sits on the well, lights a cigarette, and then blows up. And I was just like, oh my God, that's amazing. I thought it was so cool. It was funny because you see him like flying through the air in slow motion. And it was just, I don't know, as a kid, I thought that was super cool. And I think maybe I have more nostalgia for this particular film because of that. Then I probably like it more because of that than I would have normally. But even now today, just having watched it again, I still enjoy it. I still thought it was fun. I thought Harvey Keitel was quite amazing in this movie when he breaks down and cries. I mean, it feels real.
Oh my
and
God. He's fantastic.
Yeah. And Meg Tilly is really good in this too. I didn't catch that it was Meg Tilly, as we're watching it, but my wife did. She's like, she looks like Jennifer Tilly. And I'm like, no, it's not Jennifer Tilly. Definitely no, it's not Jennifer Tilly. But then I looked it up like, oh, it's her sister, Meg Tilly. I thought it was interesting, but I didn't know that before after watching this. And then Madeline Stowe, she's just freaking crazy in this movie.
Oh my God, yes. She's like a banshee.
Right. That was the craziest scene ever. It was so hilarious though. And you could tell, and this is part of the brilliance of the movie. Okay. It's not as good as Chinatown or anything like that, but there's such a brilliance to the writing. It just speaks to Robert Towne and just how good he is, because she's just forcing herself on him. And he's just like, okay, Jesus Christ, just hold your horses. Let me catch my breath.
Calm down a second, love.
It was just
I'll
absolutely
have a glass
hilarious.
of water, just chill your beans.
Right.
And I love the fact when she trashes the office, the secretaries just stood there with like bits of flour trying to put them back in her vase.
Right.
Of all the things
so
that you wanted
funny
to protect, I mean, she smashed everything. But she's there with like a lily or something, I don't know. Trying to put it nicely.
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, so I mean, there's, I think this is much more character oriented of a film. I mean, the plot is still a huge factor because it is just as convoluted as the first movie, but the characters are written much brighter and over the top than the first film. And I'm not sure if that was sort of a 90s kind of thing, because this movie was supposed to happen back in 84.
Oh, I read about that, a bit of the back history of it.
And the idea is that it was supposed to be a little bit later in Giddy's life. He's a little bit older and wiser and all that kind of stuff. So like the whole plan of this film was still supposed to be that, and it was supposed to take place 10 years later or whatever it is. And that's the reason why this movie does take place like, I think it's 11 years. Because that original script was meant to be shot back in 84. Now, I don't know how far you dug into it, but I found it fascinating as to why that kind of thing happens. And it's really terrible why it happens. So I believe Polanski was still supposed to direct this movie, but Robert Evans wanted to act in the film in the Jake Berman role. So he wanted to play the Harvey Keitel role. But I guess Towne thought he was a terrible actor. And so they got into this huge dispute to this point where I think Polanski dropped out, and then Evans and Towne had kind of a falling out, even though Evans is still I think the production company as well as still the producer on the film. There was such a battle between him and Towne over him playing the role of Jake Berman, that that the movie just languished for almost 10 years. What is it, like 7 years? Something like that. While, they were trying to work this stuff out. And finally, Jack Nicholson was like, hey, I want to make this movie. Just I'll direct it. And then it just went on from there without, I guess, Evans really having a bigger part in the movie, other than, I think, producing by name.
Yeah, because didn't they form a production company just for the specific purpose of filming this?
I believe so, yeah. But even still, I think Robert Evans still has, somehow his company is still part of it, because it's still, his name is still attached to it. It still says produced by Robert Evans, all this kind of stuff. So I'm not sure of all the details in that. But another big thing that was really hilarious is that Evans had an issue with getting a 1940 style haircut. So
that's the bit that I read, was that he didn't want to get his hair cut, and that's how it all sort of like unraveled.
And I'm just thinking to myself, that's got to be some sort of like spin. There's got to be some like Hollywood spin.
Because I'm not being funny. If you can't get your hair cut to be in a film with Jack Nicholson, I mean, what's wrong with you? Really?
Right. It's just crazy. But because of that, I guess, of all of that stuff happening, Nicholson also not only taking over directorial, he also rewrote parts of Town's script. Now, I couldn't find a whole lot of information on that. I'd be curious to read the original Town script opposed to what got shot. I'd be interested to know the differences between those, and also how Town felt about Nicholson rewriting elements, because he threw a fit when Polanski rewrote the end of the first one. He has since, years later, said, Polanski was correct. That was the right move to make. I just couldn't see it at the time, which is respectable. But I wonder what he felt about Nicholson, who obviously is not Polanski.
Yeah, I know, but still, are you going to come out and say that Jack Nicholson did something wrong?
Well, it would be at that time, it would be more likely, especially, well, look, you got to understand, you might not know, Robert Town might not be a household name to you, but this is regularly regarded as the best screenplay ever written. That just saying that carries a lot of weight, especially in Hollywood. So, yeah, I think that had Robert Town had an issue, he would have been vocal about it. Because Polanski was huge. Polanski wasn't a no name. So if he came out against Polanski, I have no doubt he would have said something about Nicholson. But either he had matured 10 years later, since Chinatown, and,
or just wanted to get the film made and conceded.
Yeah, it could have just been that. There's no telling it. So I'm going to continue to, I actually bought a book that came out recently, The Big Goodbye. And I haven't started reading it yet, but it's about the making of Chinatown.
Oh.
And I'm looking forward to reading it.
I bet that would be quite interesting, because the little bits that I stumbled across seemed really, really interesting. The behind the scenes of Chinatown seemed more interesting than Chinatown at one point. So I think that would be...
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I totally get your view of that.
Yeah, I think that would be quite an interesting book to read, to delve into the ins and outs of everything.
Right. Yeah, and I want to read it just from being a fan, but yeah, I totally get that view of it too. And I wonder if they talk about the two Jakes at all in that book. Probably not. And if they do, it's probably very brief, but I almost feel like the two Jakes deserves a book as well, because it took longer to make, and it went through different hands, and there seems to be a lot of drama there. Yeah, it would be interesting just to hear some backstory on that. So, hey, Carly, let's take a break real quick and talk to our listeners about our sponsors.